All right. Welcome, guys and girls. This is going to be the first episode of this podcast called Magnetism. And to start off with, this is completely off the cuff, so this isn't going to be perfect, but that's entirely the point, right? So this podcast is starting right here, right now, unpolished, but real. It just relates back to a concept in marathon running, or just running in general. Putting one foot in front of the other, right, and having that massive imperfect action to get started. Because to tell you the truth, I've been sitting on this idea, overthinking, the classic procrastination, waiting for the perfect moment, setup, life situation, right, in order to start a podcast. But it's just kind of just reminding myself how simple it is, that there's never going to be the perfect time, right? And so this is just that line in the sand of, hey, let's put this out there, one foot in front of the other, and let's roll with it, right? And it was exactly the same thing with when I started running. I didn't have these grandiose plans to run a 10K then a marathon. I just started. I just put on the shoes and get out of the house and ran around a block and back. Right, and this is exactly that. It's kind of comes from. This is actually this idea for this podcast actually came from discussions with friends in different circles of mine, friends from business, friends of mine who share an overlap in psychology, in personal development, in self-growth. And there's a lot of these back and forth, really deep, really meaningful conversations and chats, which stems the idea of we should actually create a podcast, right? And I know there's a lot of, and this is probably my belief kicking in about every mum and their dog has a podcast now, right? And yeah, that's just true, which means that the opportunity, right, is growing for more people to tune in and listen to your unique take, right? So that's kind of where it started, right? So to go a little bit backwards, right? Why did I decide to choose to name this podcast Magnetism? Okay. So for me, it stems from one thing, right? Magnetism is where culture, it's where brand building and the psychology of human behavior, of influence meets. So for myself personally, I've always been incredibly passionate about psychology. That was my degree, which I did in university, because I've always been fascinated about why people do what they do and they make the decisions they do in life and so on. And it's just something I've had a lifelong fascination for, which I'm just translated into throughout my own entrepreneurial career, running different businesses, right? The themes it's always tied back to is marketing, psychology, even personal branding, even content, right? And why magnetism matters right now, it's not so much that I just stumbled across it, but it's kind of like a returning back to clarity about what has been your underlying theme, right? And truth be told, I went back and forth inside ChatGPT to think of the title and of the podcast and so forth. But it's going to change, right? And it's not to get too hung up on that, right? As long as the essence, right, is there, then it will land. It will land. Okay. So magnetism isn't just one thing I want to articulate is it's not so much the externals, right? It's not so much the marketing, it's not so much the strategy, it's not so much the what you say. But for me, it means something so much deeper. Because let me ask you this: like, what makes someone magnetic? What really draws you into someone? What really draws you into a brand, into a business, into an idea, right? Underlyingly, it's magnetism. It's you're buying into not the words being said, and you're not buying into the specific strategy or content. You're buying into the person and the ideas, right, underneath that. And so for me, magnetism stems so much deeper, because in human psychology, I like to think of it like the inner game and the outer game, right? And if you can get right with yourself first, right, it will reflect out into the outer world, if that makes sense, right? And so where I'd like to take this, sometimes so what you can expect, right, is that some of the episodes will be me riffing solo like this, right? And if these kind of topics land for you guys, it will give direction and it'll give signal, right, to lean more into it. Because the overarching goal I'd like to build with this podcast is, as I'm speaking about this, is I want to create a ecosystem and a brand for people like myself, right, who yearn for depth information, good kind of fireside chats, right, with a whole wide range of people, right? Because it's kind of tricky when it's something I've heard from a mentor. I can't remember who it was a while back, but it was that if your tribe you want doesn't necessarily exist in the way you want it, we have the platforms now, aka the podcast, to build that, right? We have the podcast format to basically create the tribes we want, right? That's around our unique values and so forth, right? So some of the things I would talk about here in this podcast is psychology, identity. How do you basically present yourself, right? How do you basically see yourself, and how you create uh, the self-image, right? And how do you create the outcomes you want to magnetize the things you want? Okay, so sometimes what you can expect is I'll be riffing solo like this. Other times I'm going to bring on founders, I'm going to bring on creators, people with a interesting story. So I bring people from different walks of life. So these will be existing creators, influencers, entrepreneurs, founders, brand builders, cultural myth makers, artists, right? Ultimately, I want to bring people together. I want to create a conversational platform, right? So people like myself would really like to listen to, right? And this is why episode one, there is no outline for this, right? This is me putting a transmission out there. This is the energy, okay? And truth be told, I've done a fair bit of public speaking before and in other formats and been on other people's podcasts, but this is the first time that, I've put off the idea, but here it is, okay? So what you can expect over the next couple of episodes, what I've had in mind would be we'll unpack what makes people magnetic, what makes their brands magnetic, what makes their ideas magnetic, right? And how you can embody those too. Because it's one thing to just listen, but it's another to hear and to listen to people's stories and their unique insights and from their different walks of life, and how we're able to unpack that so that you can see. Because magnetism, in some vein, right, is about just being unforgettable, being undeniable, right? And that truly comes down to just being authentic. And authentic is like this really buzzword that's just chucked around a lot lately, right? In the same thing with the word nervous system, for instance, right? In wellness, in healing, in health, and so forth, right? So I'll clarify as it relates to authenticity. So authenticity, the embodiment of it, is going to look different for every single person. But by seeing people and listening to them from different walks of life share their stories and insights, right? And as I will interview people and unearth it, it will point to the same universal truths under different packages, different flavors, if that's the word. Right. So this is my transmission, putting it out there. And yeah, if you listen to me rambling this far, I want to personally thank you for being here from day one. This is the start. This is messy, and honestly, this is kind of quite exciting because I've been down for myself personally, and I'll unpack this in my own story over the next couple of episodes. But I kind of miss this rawness and this kind of just putting myself out there right in that way. I've had quite a fair bit of a long entrepreneurial career, but it's just great to go back to this is the basics. Put something out there. Right? This is the signal. This is the intention. This is the message, right? And now it's in motion. Okay. So if you'd like to come along for the ride and come along for the journey, then make sure to hit subscribe if you want to grow along with myself, right? And episode 2 would be around the corner. I'll talk to you later.